The snow came down in sheets, thick and relentless, burying the metal roof of Lab 47 under a pale, icy quilt. From the outside, the structure looked like a half-submerged shipping container lost in a glacier. Inside, it felt no warmer. A low hum came from the failing thermal regulators, flickering red indicators pulsing on the control panels. The lab, perched at the edge of Earth's Antarctic research zone, was never meant to host this many bodies, and certainly not so many that didn't come from Earth. Kellen Varsek rubbed his hands together, breath fogging in the frigid air. He was alone in the main corridor, crouched beside a power conduit, checking the connections again. The flashlight clipped to his jacket collar flickered. He gave it a sharp tap and it steadied. "Still no heat," he muttered, voice gravelly from cold and exhaustion. He glanced at the wall-mounted temperature display, -22 Celsius. "Great." Footsteps echoed behind him, not footsteps, exactly more like the dull suction of pads pulling off the floor, slow and uneven. Kellen turned his head as a tall, lanky creature approached, wrapped in what looked like a tarp stitched into a poncho. "Human Kellen," the alien said, voice trembling slightly. Its skin was a dull lavender, speckled with frost that refused to melt. "We are experiencing deceleration of life functions." "Yeah, I figured," Kellen said, standing and dusting off his knees. "You're freezing." The alien blinked slowly, eyelids horizontal. "Affirmative, our core processors are not designed for this. We require immediate thermal stabilization." "Where's Professor Malek?" Kellen asked, attempting to maintain cohesion in Sector 3, 3 students unresponsive. Kellen didn't wait for more. He bolted down the corridor, boots slipping slightly on frosted metal. As he passed an open door, another alien looked up from beneath a pile of insulation sheets. This one had a more compact build, skin tinged green. It didn't speak, just stared with wide, glassy eyes. Reaching Sector 3, Kellen pushed the door open and felt a wave of even colder air sting his face. Several aliens were huddled against the far wall. One lay motionless, limbs stiff. Another rocked gently, emitting a low-frequency hum that set Kellen's teeth on edge. Professor Malek, the only other human assigned to the joint research cohort, knelt beside one of the collapsed forms. She looked up as Kellen entered. "He's not responding," she said, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue. "I tried to warm him with the emergency pads, but they're not working." Kellen quickly peeled off his outer glove and reached for the alien's neck region, where their species stored thermal sensitive sensors. No pulse. He felt only ice. He looked back at Malek and shook his head. "We need to move the others. This lab wasn't built for this many different biologies." He stood and scanned the room. "Where are the heating backups?" "Offline. Fuel ran out 2 hours ago." The resupply drones stuck in the storm overhead. Kellen swore under his breath and looked at the other aliens. Most of them were students, part of a cultural exchange program that had begun barely 2 months earlier. The goal was to share scientific methods, explore Earth's ecosystems, and build interstellar rapport. Nobody had planned for a freak snowstorm to knock out power grids and trap them in an experimental outpost. He turned back to Malek. "I'm going to build something. I don't know what yet, but we need heat, fast." "Out of what?" she asked, voice weak. "Whatever's left in the supply crates, and maybe a few things that aren't meant to be taken apart." Malek nodded, then gestured at the remaining students. "I'll keep them stable." Kellen jogged back down the corridor, past the makeshift sleeping quarters where more aliens were curled under blankets made from emergency tarps. He entered the storage bay and punched in the access code. The door resisted, then finally creaked open. Inside, stacked crates lined the walls. Expired lab equipment, broken solar batteries, a few boxes of non-perishable food rations, and Kellen exhaled in relief a half-functioning portable fusion coil, dusty and dented. He dragged it into the center of the bay, then began searching for tubing, insulation foam, and anything that could be rigged into a fluid heater. As he worked, an idea formed, not just heat, comfort. He remembered something from his childhood, snow days back in Minnesota. His mother's old countertop hot cocoa machine, rusty, loud, but magical. The smell of warm chocolate, the way it thawed through your chest after shoveling the driveway. Kellen looked at the supplies again. Powdered milk from the rations, sugar packets. A rusted tin of cocoa mix, probably meant for morale emergencies. A heating coil. A fluid pump. He could do this. He dragged a cracked water purifier from the corner and began tearing it apart. 2 hours later, he had something that looked like it might explode under the wrong pressure. But it had a heating chamber, a spout, and a funnel lined with tubing scavenged from an old nutrient dispenser. He set the fusion coil to a low burn and placed the cocoa contraption atop it. The tubing hissed. The mixture began to churn. Steam rose from the top. He poured the first cup into a battered thermos, sniffed it cautiously, and took a sip. Still better than the cafeteria, he muttered. Carrying the thermos carefully, he made his way back to Sector 3. Malik's back was against the wall, eyes half closed. She looked up when she saw him. "You built that?" "Technically, it's a beverage delivery thermal unit," he said, kneeling beside her. "But yeah, hot cocoa machine." He handed her the thermos. She smelled it, blinked in surprise, and took a sip, her face relaxed. "I can't believe you actually did it." "Neither can I," Kellen admitted. Then he turned to the group of shivering aliens. "All right, let's see if this helps." He began distributing cups. The green-skinned one from earlier took a sip, then looked at the cup, then at him. "This fluid. It causes warmth." "Yep," Kellen said. "It's called cocoa, chocolate." The alien paused, then took another sip. Its skin brightened slightly, a biological response to improved internal temperature. "It is acceptable," Kellen grinned. "I'll take that." Word spread fast. Within an hour, lines formed outside the Snow Lab's main corridor, aliens shuffling forward, cups in hand, some holding blankets, others simply shaking too much to speak. Kellen worked the machine non-stop, refilling the ingredients whenever he could find substitutes. He even discovered a stash of marshmallows in a sealed container. Most of the aliens didn't understand them, but one named Vrak took a bite and declared them texturally confusing but emotionally pleasant. The heat from the machine kept the immediate area above freezing. Not ideal, but survivable. As the storm raged on outside, the cocoa machine became the center of the lab's social gravity. Kellen's hands blistered from constant handling of hot parts. His back ached from hauling crates, but he kept it running. Every time a student's skin color brightened or their trembling faded, it reminded him that this was more than just a machine. Late that night, Kellen sat against the wall, sipping the last cup of the batch. A small alien with translucent skin shuffled over and sat beside him. "You are not a thermal engineer," it said. "Nope." "Then why build this?" Kellen looked into his cup. "Because you were freezing. Nobody should freeze to death in a snow lab, especially not while studying Earth's biosphere." The alien tilted its head. "This gesture will be recorded." "Cool," Kellen said, too tired to ask what that meant. Outside, the storm began to weaken. Inside, the machine hissed, churned, and prepared another round of cocoa. By the third day, the snow around the lab had settled into hard drifts, windless and thick like the crust on a freezer-burned pie. Inside, the air had a new weight to it, still cold, but with a steady hum of life that hadn't been there before. The cocoa machine sat stubbornly in the center of the corridor, its aluminum sides now wrapped in strips of insulation foam and an old flag bearing the Earth Embassy seal. A few alien coats had been donated to the cause. It gave off a faint, sweet aroma, part chocolate, part something chemically uncertain. Kellen sat cross-legged on the floor beside it, elbows on his knees, watching the pump rattle. He hadn't slept in 2 rotations. The caffeine from the cocoa was doing strange things to his motor skills, and he'd discovered that aliens couldn't metabolize it without their eyes dilating threefold. So he'd adjusted the recipe again. Less powder, more heat. One of them had called it emotional broth. He hadn't argued. A dull clunk echoed from the loading bay. "Malik," he called, not moving. "No," came a voice not human. He turned slowly. A four-limbed figure ducked under the low arch, dragging a thin plastic sled behind it. Two more aliens followed, their faces nearly hidden beneath layered scarves made from salvaged lab curtains. The one in front was tall, with skin that shimmered faintly like a beetle's carapace. We relocated the last group from the hydroponics dome. It collapsed last night. Kellen stood, cracking his knees in the process. "Anyone hurt?" "No physical damage," the tall one said. "One individual entered shock when the nutrient vines disintegrated. It believed they were sentient." "Okay, that's weirdly sweet." "Did you bring them inside?" "They refused to leave without performing a morning ritual." "Of course they did." "I'll go check on them," Kellen said. "Stay here, warm up. The machine's working again." The tall alien nodded but didn't approach the Coco. Instead, it knelt beside the wall and began unpacking the sled. Blankets, a bundle of wiring, a handheld temperature reader with a cracked screen. Kellen made it halfway down the hallway before a small alien darted from a side room and collided with his leg. "Whoa, hey," he said, grabbing the wall to steady them both. The alien looked up barely taller than Kellen's waist. Its face was all angles and slits with a large, flickering membrane where a mouth might have been. "I require human verification," it said. Kellen blinked. "Verification of what?" "I have constructed a secondary thermal dispersal device, using your schema." "Did you copy the Coco machine?" "I improved it." "Improved it how?" "I added a propulsion system." Kellen stared. "Why would a hot beverage machine need propulsion?" "For distribution." "Efficiency?" "You made a Coco cannon." Clarification. "A self-guided dispensing unit." He didn't have the energy to argue. "Fine, show me." The alien darted back into the room it had come from. Kellen followed. Inside, a metal cart hovered just above the ground, propped up on jury-rigged magnetic lifts. A barrel-shaped tank was strapped to its top with a nozzle sticking out the front like a stubby muzzle. Tubes ran along its undercarriage, pulsing faintly. "Press this," the alien said, tapping a switch. The cart whirred to life, rotated 180 degrees and launched a stream of steaming cocoa directly into a bucket across the room. It overshot slightly, splashing the wall. Kellen raised an eyebrow. "That's actually kind of impressive." "I have named it Comfort Deployment Unit Alpha." He scratched his head. "Why Alpha? There will be more." Before Kellen could respond, another sound came from the corridor, a high-pitched tone like metal being stressed beyond reason. Not the Coco machine. Something else. He sprinted back out. One of the outer seals on the west airlock was shearing inward, a crack forming along the seam. Ice was crusted thick around it, and a faint hiss of wind had begun to bleed through. "Get everyone away from that door," he shouted. A few aliens hesitated. One was holding a cup of cocoa in both hands, unwilling to move. Kellen ran to the nearest control panel and slammed the override. The internal bulkhead began to descend, slowly, grinding against frozen tracks. The hiss grew louder. He grabbed a wrench from the emergency kit, shoved his shoulder into the panel's side and forced it down manually. With a final groan, the bulkhead sealed shut. He slumped back onto the floor, panting. "That's going to be a problem," he muttered. The tall, beetle-skinned alien appeared beside him again. "Structural breach?" "Yeah. I'll need to patch it from outside once the storm dies down. That may not be for several Earth days." Kellen looked at his hands. The skin under his fingernails had turned a strange shade of purple. He flexed them slowly. "I can't wait that long. If pressure drops too far, this whole place becomes a monument to bad planning." "We will assist." He shook his head. "No offense, but your physiology out there, it's like sending a sponge into a furnace." The alien hesitated. "Then you will go alone." "Got a better idea." Silence. "Then, your resilience is statistically improbable. Welcome to Earth." Later, near dusk if dusk could be recognized through the storm-dimmed windows, Kellen stood in the airlock chamber, wearing 3 layers of thermal gear and a helmet sealed with tape around the edges. The tape was fluorescent orange. It had cartoon ducks on it. He didn't question it. In his gloved hands, he held a repair kit cobbled from a metal tray, sealant foam, and a repurposed oxygen tank nozzle. The outer door creaked open, revealing a wall of white. He stepped out. The wind hit him with the enthusiasm of a thrown brick. His eyes watered instantly, but the visor held. Each step crunched through powder and ice, boots sinking. The breach was 5 meters to the left of the main vent, now partially buried. He dropped to his knees, scraped the ice away, and wedged the tray over the crack. Foam hissed out in uneven bursts, hardening on contact. He held it in place, counting out 60 seconds in his head. Behind him, something moved. Kellen turned slowly. Vrak the green-skinned, one who'd called marshmallows confusing, stood holding a long pole with a glowing tip. "I brought light," Vrak said. "You followed me?" "Yes." "Why, you were alone." Kellen exhaled, half a laugh. "That's not really a reason." Vrak tilted its head. It was enough. The patch held. They stayed out only 3 more minutes. Any longer, and Kellen's hands might have stopped responding. Back inside, he stripped off the outer layers, revealing sweat-damp clothes beneath. Malek met him in the corridor, holding a datapad. "You're going to get frostbite," she said. "I don't think I have the circulation to afford it." She didn't laugh. Instead, she handed him the pad. "Their Homeworld Council wants an update. They're requesting a summary of human emergency response protocols under duress." Kellen took the pad, stared at the blinking cursor, then tapped a few keys. "They're not going to like the answer," he said. "What did you write?" "Make cocoa, save your people." "Tape your helmet shut if you have to." She stared at him. "What? You could have added something about triage or hazard assessment. Maybe next time." He passed her the pad, then wandered back toward the machine. It was still humming, its lights flickering against the dusk-filtered corridor. Vrak was waiting with a fresh cup. He handed it over. "I modified the sweetness," Vrak said, "based on observed facial micro-expressions." Kellen sipped. It tasted like sugar had been mugged by a vanilla bean. "Actually, this is good." Vrak's eyes brightened. "I will calibrate the cannon accordingly," Kellen groaned. "You're really going to make more of those, aren't you?" "Yes," Vrak said. "They bring unity." Kellen leaned against the wall, watching the steam rise from his cup. Outside, the storm was thinning. Inside, the lab hadn't lost a single person since the cocoa machine started running. He took another sip and closed his eyes. Unity's not a bad thing. By the morning of the 5th day, the wind had finally stopped howling. What remained outside was silence, thick, muffled, and heavy with snow piled against the lab like a siege engine that had given up. Sunlight pushed through the cloud cover in pale streaks, casting silver over the frost-glazed windows. Inside, the cocoa machine was still running, but the rations were nearly gone. Kellen stood over it, one hand on the side panel, the other holding a spoon he'd bent into a makeshift stirrer. His parka sleeves were singed from a minor flare-up during a late-night attempt to increase the pump's efficiency. There was a new patch on the side of his glove made from heat-resistant tape, and a faint chocolate stain that wouldn't wash out. Vrak hovered nearby, holding a clipboard scavenged from the defunct communications room. "I have completed the distribution logs," Vrak said, tapping the paper with a stubby stylus. "Average consumption has plateaued. Morale indicators remain elevated." "You're tracking morale?" It seemed relevant. Kellen glanced at the clipboard. The graph was color-coded with odd spikes labeled Flavor Variant 9 and Introduction of Whipped Topping. He nodded slowly. "Any signs of cabin fever?" One individual attempted to name the floor tiles. "That's not conclusive." It then proposed marriage to tile 17. Kellen sighed. "Okay, slightly more conclusive." He turned back to the machine. The heating element coughed, then hissed back to life. The last of the powdered mix was swirling into the reservoir. After this batch, it was over. As the pump churned, the door to the secondary chamber creaked open. Professor Malek entered, her posture straighter than it had been days earlier. She wore a thick scarf made from shredded insulation tubing and carried a clipboard of her own. Medical bays stable, she said. No new cases of hypothermia in over 24 hours. Anyone still hallucinating, just the one who tried to eat a sock yesterday, still thinks it's a fruit, apparently a woolberry. Kellen handed her a cup from the fresh batch. Last of it. She took a sip, then frowned. Tastes. Saltier? Had to use the emergency protein mix. It's got sodium for reasons. Malik didn't ask. She sat down on an overturned crate and leaned her head back against the wall. I got a ping from the orbital station, she said. Rescue transport's finally en route. 12 hours tops. Kellen's shoulders dropped. A breath escaped him like someone had unplugged a drain. 12 hours, he repeated. We made it, barely. If that seal hadn't held, it did. Malik looked at him. You look like hell. I feel like a half-thawed burrito. You should get checked. I will, now. He gave her a long look, then pressed 2 fingers to his left wrist and felt for a pulse. Too fast. He pulled up his sleeve and blinked. His skin was blotched red and pale, like someone had dabbed him with watercolor and forgot to finish. Okay, he admitted, maybe a little frostnip. That's not frostnip, she said, already pulling open the med kit. Off with the jacket. Kellen groaned and peeled it off. His undershirt stuck to his back. She ran a scanner over his hands, then his chest, then tapped the screen. You've got mild hypothermia, elevated heart rate, and you've been running on cocoa fumes for 4 days. Sit down or I'll knock you down. I'm sitting. He lowered himself onto a crate beside the machine. Vrak stepped forward. Is he structurally compromised? No, Malik muttered, but he's not far from it. I can construct a thermal cocoon. No cocoons, Kellen said, eyes closed. Just give me 10 minutes. Vrak hesitated, then produced a packet from its coat. I saved this, it is the last marshmallow. Kellen opened one eye. You kept a marshmallow, it was for occasion. He took it and placed it gently in his cup. It floated like a tiny, sugar-white raft. From the far end of the corridor, a trio of aliens approached. One was carrying a box. Another held a banner with hand-painted symbols. The third had a string of lights wrapped around its shoulders. The one with the box stepped forward. We have assembled a recognition tribute, it said. Kellen blinked. A what? A ritual of gratitude. Your actions ensured the collective survival. We wish to acknowledge this. The alien opened the box. Inside was a crude statuette made from melted plastic tubing and a cocoa cup lid. It vaguely resembled Kellen, though with extra limbs and exaggerated hair. I look like a squid with a caffeine addiction. It is a symbol, the alien said, of resilience and improbable solutions. The banner was unfurled. It read in wobbly script, Kellen of the thermal beverage. Malik covered her mouth, shaking slightly. Vrak stepped forward and placed a hand on Kellen's shoulder. You are now regarded as a folk figure. I don't want to be a folk figure. Too late. Kellen looked at the statuette again. It had been painted with cocoa powder. The base was labeled with a series of alien characters. What does that say? Vrak translated. He who boiled warmth from chaos. Kellen exhaled, then leaned back against the wall. All right, but no holidays. I'm drawing the line at parades. The alien trio made a series of harmonic tones that might have been agreement, or laughter. He couldn't tell anymore. Malik stood and stretched her neck. Rescue's coming. We'll get you into a heated med bay, get everyone rehydrated, and maybe, just maybe, retrain the one who built the cocoa cannon. Vrak perked up. It has been renamed. Comfort Deployment Unit Beta now features voice command. Oh no, Malik muttered. I will demonstrate. Definitely not now, Kellen groaned. They spent the last daylight cycle clearing paths to the external airlocks. The snow was waist-deep in places, but it had settled. Kellen worked with a shovel fashioned from a broken panel. Vrak used a heat rod to melt narrow trenches. The others formed relays, passing gear and packing up scientific samples. The lab had taken damage. One wing was unsalvageable, but everyone was accounted for. Even the plant mourner had rejoined the group, now carrying a vine clipping in a nutrient pouch like a memorial locket. By the time the rescue shuttle touched down at the perimeter beacon, the sun had begun to dip again. The shuttle's ramp hissed open, casting warm light across the ice. Kellen looked back once. The cocoa machine had been powered down, wrapped in a thermal blanket and secured with straps. Varsek had insisted it be preserved as a cultural artifact. They boarded the shuttle. The ramp sealed behind them. Inside, heat flooded the cabin. Real heat circulated, filtered, and blessedly dry. Kellen dropped into a seat and closed his eyes. Malik sat across from him. "You did good," she said. "I built a drink dispenser from garbage. You built hope from garbage." He didn't respond. Just let the warmth soak into his bones. Varsek sat beside him, holding the statuette. "We will tell your story," Varsek said. "It will be translated into 300 dialects." "Make sure to mention the marshmallow," Kellen mumbled. "It will be its own chapter." As the shuttle lifted off, leaving the snowbound lab behind, no one spoke for a while. There was only the sound of engines and the slow, collective exhale of survival. Kellen leaned his head back and let the motion rock him. No more cocoa, finally.